books, 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 ting, books, 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 ting, books, 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 ting, books, 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 ting. Shelve it!
The recording in progress, woman, that nobody else can hear apart from the people who are taking part in the X23 2023 book club. And you are Tor.
I am.
Also known as Billy Nomates. The guest on our book club, I don't even know what number it is now, but the book that we've been doing is Sula by Toni Morrison, and you're our guest. So thank you so much for coming on the book club.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's nice to see your face.
Yours too. Now, when I asked you about coming on this book club, you said straight away, yes, of course I'll do it, because I've just read a brilliant book by Rick Rubin I've been telling everyone about. So let's get that off your chest first. Tell me about this Rick Rubin's book.
Well, it's called The Creative Act. It's a way of being. It's like Rick Rubin, The Creative Act, a way of being. And yeah, do you know what? Right, it, like everything that gets popular, a lot of people slag this off. So I'm going to start with that because I think it has the tendency to come across like a faddy creative person's book of quotes, and that's, for me, I understand why people think that, but I read it, and I'm really dyslexic, so I've read it over a long period of time and in really small chunks because it's hard for me to concentrate and it's hard for me to even make sense of the words. But it's written in such a way for me that actually I really like that it's basic and simple and really goes back to the essence of just being creative, which I don't know, it's so subjective and it's so open to interpretation. But I think what I really like about it is that it feels like it is saying all the things that you just wish, like if you're in the room creating something and it's just you, and let's just say like that you have a friend that was sat next to you just looking out for you, it's all the things that a friend would say to you. So I feel like we're so savage and harsh to ourselves, like when we're creating things and we're not getting it right, or we're making mistakes, or we're wasting time, or procrastinating. And it's just like a human voice that just speaks to the human in you before anything else. And I just, yeah, I really resonated with it, especially sort of having gone through a quite, crazy few years with Billy Nomates records and things doing well and having things in the spotlight, and then sort of wanting to sort of tear things up and start again. It's a really friendly book. Like it lets you off the hook a bit, and you kind of breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. And it is basic, but I like basic. I'm basic. Like, but it's also not, because it's like it talks about how it's like how to create and like the space to, like, your relationship with the world around you before you're creating, and what you need to create, but also what you don't need to create. And just yeah, I recommend like musicians read it, because I think it's just super friendly, which I know sounds really simple, but sometimes you do need that friend, I think, or just that kind of voice that speaks to the person that's creating rather than than just the creation, yeah. And it's genuinely worked for me. There's so many things that I'm just writing dilly-dally and doing these demos on a Friday at the moment just for my own tape, and I'm doing that out of just pure having a bit of joy back in writing, which I actually lost for a while. And I've been applying some of this stuff that Rick Rubin talks about, and it's yeah, like I say, it's basic, but it's good to be reminded of it,
Because for those people who don't know who Rick Rubin is, he's a big producer, isn't he? Record producer.
Yeah. So he's just worked on so many people's albums, like from Eminem's big stuff to smaller artists, to indie artists, and he's is more sort of famous for working with people one-on-one, like with themselves, less the record. Like he even says himself, like he doesn't really rate himself as a producer. He's more brings out people's sort of spirit.
Like a mentor, so you can get the best out of your own self.
Yeah, and I think that's why people rag on him a bit, because like,
no, I think that's brilliant. I think
I do.
I think some records that we've made, me and David, we've absolutely labored over them, and they sound no better or worse than records we've made that have been an absolute dream. So actually, that level of anxiety in making a record, like I'm worrying about it and feeling anxious about this doesn't work, that doesn't work, it doesn't make any difference to whether it's good or not in the end, so you might as well not feel it.
Totally.
That's our approach with our new album. Like, you might as well not feel it, because it's going to make no difference to how good it is.
And oftentimes I think as well, like you can actually hear when someone's like a little bit more at ease with the process. Like I certainly hear, I don't know about you, but I certainly hear things and things that I've made in the past where I go, oh, I wasn't comfortable with that. I can hear it. I can hear even just some of the production choices or the delivery. And then like at the moment where it's like, I'm just like you say, you guys recording just in your house, like I've got all my stuff like by my desk. I just pick it up at night. I do stuff, listen in the morning and go, I really like the sound of that. Because I'm just not thinking, I'm just not.
Totally. I agree. But also, you can like something at the time and then grow to hate it, or you can hate something at the time, grow to like it.
Yeah.
This quote from Dave Fridman has always told us, a record is never finished. You just run out of time.
It's so true.
It's so true. And like for our world, we're like juggling so much shit that we've just got to pull with it. And it's like, do you like the sound of that? Or is that, would you do that again if you could? Yes. Have we got to pick up our lad from school? Yes.
Yeah.
We haven't got time. Like, so you just have to like accept it. But that, I guess that, acceptance of things not being perfect is part of getting towards a perfect record in a sense, because
absolutely
that's part of the battle against what you want and what finally is causes a lot of anxiety with musicians, I think. So it's good to just fucking drop it all and just go, whatever comes out comes out.
And I love that, that you say, oh, like, so we've got to go pick up work from school, so when this session's finished, like that's it. I love that. Like sometimes the restraints is like, that's a brilliant thing, because it's like, okay, I've just finished something. It's like I had to send it over today to Ed to master it so I can put it up tomorrow. And the whole point of doing this process is exactly to have that, where it's like there is a time limit on it, and so whatever is achieved in that time is good enough, and like I'll live with it.
Exactly. So do you reckon that anyone can read, like, because a lot of the books I've done in the book club so far, well, all of them apart from Stuart Braithwaite's book, the Mogwai book. Have you read that? That's brilliant. Spaceships.
I haven't, no, but I would like to. Yeah.
All of them is like fiction. So would you be able to read this book not read it, obviously, but would you be able to get anything out of it if you're not a musician?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just any person can read this book, and it's not tailored to musicians at all. It's any creative person. And then the whole point of it actually is that creativity it's not just about the product, it's like the process and sort of the meaning of life, I suppose, if you want.
Yeah, it so is though. I'm into that. Like, I feel like I'd like that book.
Honestly, I really enjoyed it. It's a really good read. There's a lot of, if you read like some of the hype around, there's a lot of people just being like, oh, it's like a motivational quote. You know how people love to rag on that.
Yeah.
And I get it, but I think it works. And actually, I think there's something it's like a simple song. It's actually hard to write. And I'm glad that he did, because it's really worked for me. So.
Ace. So do you read much then?
I really don't, is the truth. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I do audiobooks occasionally. Got into a lot of true crime recently. I don't know what that's about. Sort of fascinating when you're just like washing up and you're like listening to some like mass murderer's tale. Like, I don't know, sort of takes me out of reality a bit. But yeah, so mainly audiobooks and podcasts a lot. But I do like to, it's like with Rick Rubin's book, because that was recommended to me. So if someone recommends me a book, especially if it's a friend, I will probably go buy it. And like I say, I am quite dyslexic, and it's not that I can't read, it's just that things jump out differently on a page to me. So I read very slowly and over a long period of time. But hopefully it kind of goes in that way. I feel like it goes in that way.
Yeah, well, I think people read books in different ways. I mean, like I would speak, I mean, I don't like Kindles. I'd say I don't like them. I've never even used one. So I'm judging them, saying I don't like them before, but
I've never used one.
I just like the physicality of spines of books, on a shelf to go, read it. Well, that was good, blah, blah, blah. I like the physical form and the artwork, the cover art and all that, just like records, but some people obviously do like Kindles and that's still reading a book, but I would technically say, you've not read that book because you've not read it on a Kindle. But our sound engineer Dan, he's going away to Egypt next week, and I just recommended him loads of books for his Kindle. And then our other sound engineer Laurie, and he, like, while driving, he would listen to loads of audiobooks and go, have you read that? Oh yeah, I've read that. Well, I actually listened to it while I was driving through America. But
yeah. I do that a lot. Like, on tour, I was listening to a lot of audiobooks or podcasts, and just something about people talking words to me I find quite soothing. And like I know with Rick Rubin's book there is an audio version of it, and it's him saying when it's the author that speaks it. For me that's quite profound, because my chosen way into a world will always be audibly, and so when you can have the author speak it, that to me is that's like the sweet spot for me, because then I truly feel like I can really get into a book.
I think Jarvis Cocker's just read his new book.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's done the audiobook for that.
He's got one of them voices as well that's just like drags you in.
Just listen to it all day, couldn't you?
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
So what about what books have you sort of read, listened to, or have you had in your life? Is there any one standout one or a few standout ones? Or is there stuff that you recommend to friends that you think it's brilliant, that you've got to read this? Or
I always go back to, and it's one that my dad introduced me to as a teenager, and then I brought it as an adult. And it's Dan Millman's The Peaceful Warrior. It's I don't know if you know Dan Millman. He writes sort of like, they're quite, I suppose, again, people are going to hate me, but I suppose you could call it like a spiritual book.
Oh yeah, I'm into spiritual books.
But it's like it's a story. He writes stories, but he writes them with a very sort of spiritual and what's the word? Like they almost have they're like warriors' tales, but they're put into modern contexts. And it's a story, The Peaceful Warrior. It's the story of this young guy, and it's sort of a coming of age story, really. And it's written with all of that stuff. But the like real crux of it is that he has to overcome all of this stuff in his life. He's like he's a I'm doing a terrible job of this. He's an athlete. He's a young athlete, this guy, the main character, and he gets an injury, and then he can't do his sport anymore, but that was his whole life. And one night he meets this like old man in this gas station. He's working a job there, actually. He meets this old man in this gas station, and it turns out this old man's kind of like this sage figure and gives him this advice, and it's like all advice for life. And he keeps going back to the gas station, and things happen in his life. And you know what? It's just a cute story, but it's one of them stories like where it's profound. Like the basis of it is very profound and seeps into a lot of sort of spiritual teachings and stuff, but it's in a modern context, and I like that.
Yeah, like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is quite like that. And also, Jonathan Bach, he did Illusion. Sorry, he did Richard Bach, and he did Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Yes, Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Yes.
And though I am a massive fan of those books because
I don't think anyone knew about Jonathan Livingston Seagull. That was huge
oh
for me
my
growing
God,
up.
I love that book.
Yeah, it's very similar to that
Oh
actually.
right, and if you've not read Illusions by Richard Bach,
Oh,
Illusions
have a look
is
at that. Let me write that down.
wonderful, really tiny, thin book, probably even smaller than Jonathan Livingston Seagull, but just with that same spiritual metaphor. It's absolutely wonderful, and I love books like that.
Yeah. Oh, I did. You know, they just really remind me. My granny was really into it, and then my dad, and then so for me, it's like the association. It's almost like a family teaching, or there's something in it for me that's like it's got a really nice connotation because it's almost like I always read a bit when I feel quite down or like because it's familiar, but also it's like it just feels like you'll be okay. Those stories make you feel like you're going to be okay. I
Yeah,
like these things at the minute.
yeah. No, I do too. No, they're really. I love books like that. It's great. So going on to this is the book club book, right?
Right. I
It's
don't know this book, so
Yeah, this is by Toni Morrison, right? Now, this book has been on my shelf for 20 odd years and it's just been there. And I don't know whether I got it from a charity shop or David got it from a charity shop, but it's coming to live in our house. But because I hadn't chosen to read it, because usually I'm like, oh, I'll buy this one, I'll buy that one, or someone gives me one. It's just got neglected. And I saw it and I was like, I really want to read some Toni Morrison stuff because she's really, her best known book is called Beloved. Toni Morrison. So this one is not as well known, but she's apparently a really prolific black writer, and this was absolutely brilliant.
Oh, okay, cool.
Complete feminist novel, brilliant to read. It's about a black community in I can't remember the name of the place, but it's called Medallion City. And it's just like an old American kind of community. And it's all the little people that you have, there's the mad old man that lives out on the marsh that everyone like talks about. There's the woman that goes, Sula's like the woman who goes stealing everyone's husbands and sleeping with everyone. And it's just kind of about the community in a place called The Bottom, which I thought was really funny. And I'll tell you why it gets his name if you don't mind me reading a little bit of it, because it's
absolutely,
it's quite funny. So this is what this Medallion City's got. This part of where the black community lives is called The Bottom, right? And this is how it came about. So a good white farmer promised freedom and a piece of bottom land to his slave if he would perform some very difficult chores. When the slave completed the work, he asked the farmer to keep his end of the bargain. Freedom was easy. The farmer had no objection to that, but he didn't want to give up any land. So he told the slave that he was very sorry that he had to give him valley land. He'd hoped to give him a piece of the bottom. The slave blinked and said he thought valley land was bottom land. The master said, oh no, see those hills? That's bottom land, rich and fertile. But it's high up in the hills, said the slave. High up from us, said the master, but when God looks down, it's the bottom, and that's why we call it so. It's the bottom of heaven, so the best land there is. So the slave pressed his master to try and get him some. He preferred it to the valley, and it was done, which accounted for the fact that white people lived on the rich valley floor in that little river town in Ohio, and the blacks populated the hills above it, taking small consolation in the fact that every day they could literally look down on the white folks. And that's within page 2, and it just sets the scene for the whole book in the fact that, the black people in America completely repressed, tricked, by the whites, and women as well. And that like echoes through the whole book about women. Women are completely like Sula herself, who's like quite an independent character. So this like community, she goes and lives somewhere else for 10 years. She goes to college, university, and she comes back, and then everyone's like, oh, who do you think you are, going away, coming back here, and then being educated. And she kind of gets made into sort of demonized, really. It's a really great feminist novel. I want to read almost every book Toni Morrison's read now off the back of that. It was great, and just such a little thing as well. Do you know,
It's lovely. Yeah. I love the art and like even the font. Do you know, I find like the font on a book will really entice me sometimes.
yeah,
Like it's just it's got that, is it 70s?
yeah.
Yeah, it looks 70s. Like
Yeah, it is. And I think what's interesting to me is I think when you're talking about Black history in America, it can be really, well, it's really depressing, isn't it? And it can be quite hard going.
it's fucking awful.
Like
Like
when you read, like, for example, when you read about the book Roots, I don't know if you've read Roots, or it was actually a TV show, a TV series, Roots, in the 70s, but that's really hard going. And it starts off, in Africa, where people were literally forcibly taken from their country. It follows this one guy, Kunta Kinte, I think he's called, from Africa over to America, and follows him his entire life, and then follows his children and his children's children. And it's an absolutely mind-blowing book. And it's pretty thick, so I'd get it on audiobook or watch it on telly. I think it's been televised, but it's really hard going. Whereas what Toni Morrison does, I think, in Sula, in the same way that who did the Grapes of Wrath?
oh, I know. I say I know.
You do. Oh,
No.
and he done Cannery Row. John Steinbeck, right? Well, in the same way that John Steinbeck like brings a lot of humor to his writing. So John Steinbeck brings humor to very bleak situations, and so like Toni Morrison did that too. Just the whole of the thing of the bottom. You can't help but read that tale about the bottom and just think, oh, for fuck's sake. Do you know what I mean? Like they've been duped yet again. Like the slaves that were given the freedom, they've got the shittest land ever, but been sold it in a way that they actually begged to have it. Do you know what I mean? And it's like there's some humor in that. And like there's another guy in the book called Shadrach, who is like a World War I veteran who's got like PTSD, and like he's going around campaigning for a national suicide day, just so that everyone can commit suicide like on one day and just get it over with. And there's something like darkly funny about that.
Yeah. Oh, I love a bit of dark humor. Like,
and in a way that, like, when you're reading about slavery, and Black repression in America, that humor just lifts it slightly, so that you can read, like it's readable, it doesn't bring you down too much. And I think it's really great, a great author. Like, I mean, I'm just thinking now, who did To Kill a Mockingbird?
oh God, I'm really bad with names.
Oh my God, I'm gonna have to look it up now. Because this is going to really annoy me. Because she did the same thing. Like she used humor to kind of lighten it, Harper Lee, of course. Like to bring out, the because otherwise it would be very hard reading to read a book that was just like about the shitness of this living in this town, But when you bring the reality, the realness of characters into it, and those characters are funny and they say stupid stuff and they're pissed up and do weird stuff and it's funny. Yeah, I find it really quite a humorous book, really. So, but also tragic. So it was great. So I wonder what other people in the
I'll have a look at it. Yeah, I'll see if I can find a version of it. I'm just making a note of it. Toni Morrison. Yeah, I had heard of Toni Morrison's stuff. I haven't indulged much, but I will.
Another one which is brilliant on Black history is Octavia Butler, and called Kindred, and that was I'm on with that at the moment, and that was recommended to me by John Duran, and about a time traveling woman in the 70s, bizarrely, and she has a weird like seizure sort of thing, for want of a better word, and time travels back to 18th century slave plantations in America, and yeah, she's,
life on Mars, isn't it? That like
she's stuck there for ages, like helping out an ancestor of hers, and then she gets back. If she's lucky, she'll get back, to her own time, and then she keeps going again. But that's a bit of sci-fi, but that's a really good. And that's
cool.
Toni Butler. I'd really recommend that.
Do you prefer to read? Do you do audiobooks, or do you prefer to just have it as a physical thing?
Oh, always a physical thing. But I don't do hardback books, apart from things that I'm not sure are going to come out in paperback. There's
that
a lot of like
just an aesthetic thing, or
no, it's a. I mean, I don't know why, because I've carried amp since I was 15, so I've no trouble with like strength. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, a hardback book, if I'm sat up in bed, it's unwieldy. I'm just like reading the fucking Bible. Do you know what I mean? It's like turning it like that. It's like, I don't want that. I want to be able to like lie on, my side, or like just read, and put it in my bag dead easy. Do you know what I mean? Rather than, yeah.
Are you one of those people that can read anywhere? So like, would you read on the train, on like?
Oh God, yeah. I read everywhere. I read in the tour bus, on the train. I read pissed. That's the best bit. When I come home and I literally read a chapter of a book pissed, and I can't remember any of it, and I have to reread the next night. But it's the ritual for me. It's like, I don't know like if say you come home every night and you watch the news or put your telly on.
Yeah.
It's like that. When I've done a day, whatever I'm up to, whether I'm out down the pub or whether I'm just, wandering around the house, it's like if I get in bed, I am, before that light goes out, I am reading.
Have you always been that way?
No, I fucking hated reading when I was a kid. Awful. Thought it was shit and boring.
That's good then.
It was shit and boring though. It's fucking awful. Like,
so when did it kick in for you then? When were you like, books are my best?
Well, when I started to read books that were all the books at school that we read were like Jane Eyre, do you know what I mean? And that sort of shit, like really long-winded.
Mice and Men, like, oh.
Yeah, Pride and Prejudice. What a load of fucking bollocks. Do you know, like,
Tyson, is it? Like,
said nothing to me about my life, and just long-winded, archaic claptrap about aristocrats, do you know? And then my friend, people have probably heard this and they're like, oh, not this bloody tale again. But my friend Darren lent me American Psycho when I was 15, and he said, don't tell your mum. And that was it. Like, I read a book that had swearing in, and it was about swearing. There was swearing in it. It was about serial killer. There was like cutting off people's body parts and storing them in the freezer. There was a whole chapter on Huey Lewis and the News. So stylistically, even though I wasn't a Huey Lewis and the News fan, it was weird.
Like, that's today.
Yeah. It's just like, it's weird. And it just made me think, ping, like, fuck, you can write like this. This is what books are. And then I got into a lot of Charles Bukowski, and that's all, really rough and sweary and alcoholic. And I was just like, this is what this is speaking to me. and then I was just off, reading all sorts of books, because then I knew that it wasn't about what the establishment told you books were. And it was what you wanted to. I guess it's like if you're forced to listen to classical music or play the piano as a kid, and then you get to 14 or something and you're like, fuck it, I want to play drums or pick up a guitar,
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre that books are presented that way, isn't it? When you think about it, like, it's almost as if, like, yes, when you read a book, it is like this, and it's fucking not. Like, it's kind of odd. But,
it's it's the same thing for music. It's like if you're in that classical music thing, if you went to opera or saw a classical concert, although maybe now I might get something out of that I wouldn't have done when I was 15, potentially, because I'm a bit more open-minded than I was then. I was very close-minded, I think, about genres of music when I was younger. But essentially, it's totally different, isn't it? Like, you're not going to like necessarily punk rock music if you're into classical? And why should I, be into, Pride and Prejudice if I like reading Charles Bukowski or whatever, so.
I do think it's a really good point, and I think it's like you're saying, and things change, like with the same with books. It's like, yeah, the things that you wouldn't get out of a book that you could get out of a book now. If Rick Rubin's book was presented to me at like 18, I'd have thought it was really wanky.
Yeah.
Having like lived through some shit, I think it's really good. And I do like that with books and music, that like time and context and growth and who you were and who you are can really just, I don't know, it can really fuck with stuff, can't it? And like in the most exciting way. Like,
yeah, I agree, and it'd be interesting. And I might read some classics again, because, like, for example, I've not read any Charles Dickens and stuff. Well,
yeah.
much. I think I've read a few, but there are stuff. I mean, I was a massive fan of Thomas Hardy, like years and years ago. He was the only one out of all of them that I could stick, that we actually studied at school. Thomas Hardy, I was like, oh, Mary of Casterbridge, it's great. Jude the Obscure, brilliant. But the rest of it is just utter bullshit. But I could probably read like Wuthering Heights now or whatever and be like, okay,
I see something else in it. Like,
yeah, I see something else in it. But at the time I was just, and all these people who say, Jane Eyre is the favorite book ever, they've not read books. Like, they just I refuse to accept that I've ever read a fucking book.
Yeah, it's like cheese sandwich is nice if you only ever eat cheese sandwiches, you know what I mean? Like, there's other sandwiches.
Exactly. It's like our little lad, he says, I don't like that. And then, you haven't tried it though.
Yeah.
You say you don't like it when you've tried it, but so yeah.
I'm going to go back to reading as actually part of this theatre group that I can talk about next year, really. But I'm going to read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein because I haven't read it, and I think it's important that I read it. But also the fact that like she's this 18-year-old girl that like did something completely on the fucking edge of her time. I feel like I need to read that. Like, the older I get, I'm like, I want to like, and she's off her face when she writes it as well. And I just think like, yeah, actually, that's one I've missed and need to. I think there's stuff in that,
Yeah, totally. I mean, I really want to get into films more than I am, because I think, God, like I am so big style into books. That's partly why. It is why I started the book club. And you said before, like, oh, you'll only maybe read a book when someone recommends one to you. Well, I started the book club because I just feel like I wasn't connected to other people that were reading the sort of stuff that I read, and then you don't want, Amazon, because you bought this, you bought that, or, just reads like looking what other people say. It's like whatever other people say is good, I always think is what I won't like,
Yeah, so, I totally have that. I totally have the same snobbery. I'm like, if everyone rushes to a stage to watch so and so, I'm like, I better not even that good. Can't help it.
I want to create a community that can suggest me books that I will actually enjoy reading. And there have been people from the Ex-Book Club that have suggested stuff and I've bought it and read it and it's been brilliant. But like films is what I should really get into, because like films, I don't know enough about obscure
films. No, I don't actually. And when I meet people that are really into it and they reference things and they go, you've not seen that? And I'm like, no. And they're like, right, well, you shouldn't really be a person then. It's like, and I get it, some people, that's how important culturally.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with us with music. Like, we're probably aware of all the tiny little bands in all different towns all around the UK, but most people who aren't into bands or music, will only have heard of the top level of bands that gets in the charts or gets that exposure. And it's the same with films for me. Like, I'm into I love a lot of odd stuff. I mean, David Lynch I'm just obsessed by. Nice. But there will be filmmakers out there at my level of band, but as a filmmaker. But I'm
yeah. And that's really exciting. It's an exciting prospect, isn't it? Because I always think like film, well, same with books, but film can really inform music and music can really inform film. And and book, like the world that book creates can be really that storytelling aspect. I really like that about, I think that's why I go back to that Dan Millman book, because it's a fictional tale, but I love creating a world, like I haven't read Lord of the Rings because it just frightens me, but I will sit through the film and I will try and understand the world, and I do love to get into our world, because I think it's like when you create stuff, it's that escapism, isn't it? And
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. It's that. I've written that Dan Millman book down, A Peaceful Warrior.
Yeah. If you like Jonathan Livingston Seagull, it's like very similar to that, and it's easy to read. He writes in a very, it's almost aimed at teenagers, but you can totally read it as an adult, like as is.
Okay, ace. Well, we'll take that as your recommendation, and thank you very much, Tor, for joining us on the book club today.